So, India is making a huge move. We're talking about a really ambitious plan to completely shake up its research and innovation scene and hopefully rocket into the top ranks of the world's scientific leaders. Let's get into it. And at the center of it all is this number. Just look at it, 1 lakh crore rupees. I mean, that's a trillion rupees. This isn't just a budget boost. It's a massive statement, a huge financial bet designed to fundamentally change how innovation gets done in the country. And this isn't some low-key policy shift. The ambition is coming right from the top. The Prime Minister himself is calling it a game changer. So the message is clear. They're aiming for a total revolution in research. But why? Why this huge push right now? Well, this chart right here really tells the story. For years, India has been spending just 0.64% of its GDP on R&D. Now, you compare that to the big advanced economies, they're putting in over 2%. That's a massive gap, and that's the problem this whole thing is trying to fix. All right, so how are we going to unpack this whole thing? We're going to treat it like a machine. First, we'll look at the brain, the strategy part. Then the engine, where the money comes from. We'll trace the fuel lines to see how that money flows. And then, we've got to talk about some potential design flaws before we look at the road ahead. Okay, let's start with the brain of the operation, the new Command Center for Indian Research, the ANRF. So what is the ANRF? It stands for the Anison National Research Foundation. It was set up by an act of parliament just last year, in 2023. Basically, it's a brand new body meant to replace the older, maybe a bit clunky system. Its job is to provide that really high-level strategic direction for all of India's science and research. And when I say high-level, I really mean it. Just look who's on the governing board. The Prime Minister is the chairperson. You've got top union ministers as vice presidents. It's packed with the government's top brass. This structure is designed to send a message. This is a huge national priority. But, and this is a big but, this is where the first real debate kicks in. You look at who's running the brain, and then you look at who's not there. No one from the central universities. No one from the state universities, and that's where 95% of students are. No leaders from India's own domestic industries. No young entrepreneurs. So it raises a pretty big question, right? Can this brain really work at its best without direct input from the very people and institutions it's supposed to be leading? Okay, so we've seen the brain. Now let's look at the engine that's going to power this whole machine. The RDI fund.
Yep, this is that 1 lakh crore, that trillion rupee fund we talked about. And its whole purpose is to tackle one of the biggest roadblocks in Indian innovation, getting private companies to spend big on R&D. The idea is to offer them long-term loans at super low interest rates to, take some of the risk out of those big, ambitious research projects.
And this money isn't just for anyone. It's specifically targeted at what they're calling sunrise sectors. Think about the most critical, high-growth industries for the future: AI, biotech, deep tech, quantum computing. This is where the government is placing its bets for India to compete on the world stage. And this slide, this comparison, really nails the strategic shift that's happening here. The old way, the government was pretty much funding most of the R&D in the country. The new goal? To completely flip that script. The idea is to make the private sector the main engine of innovation, just like you see in the world's leading economies. All right, so we have a brain and we have an engine. But how does the fuel actually get to that engine? Let's take a look at the fuel lines, the nuts and bolts of how this money is actually going to be handed out. Okay, it might look a little complicated, but it's basically a two-step process. Step 1. That 1 lakh crore rupees gets put into what's called a Special Purpose Fund, or SPF, which is part of the ANRF. Now, here's the key part. This fund doesn't just hand out cash directly to companies. Instead, it moves to Step 2. It gives the money to professional, second-level fund managers. We're talking investment funds, big financial companies. They're the ones who then go out, find the best R&D projects in the private sector, and provide the financing. And you can see that process laid out perfectly in this official diagram. The money flows from the government's main fund into the ANRF special fund, then down to those fund managers, and finally, out to the private companies and startups doing the actual work. It's a system designed to use private sector financial know-how to spend public money wisely. So, if you're a company, what's the deal? How do you get this money? Well, for the most part, it's going to be long-term loans with really low or maybe even zero interest. If you're a startup, they might even take an equity stake. But here's a crucial point. The fund usually only covers up to half the project's cost. The company has to have some skin in the game, so they need to go find the other 50% from somewhere else. Okay, so a plan this big, this ambitious, it's not going to be without its critics, right? There are definitely going to be questions. So let's dig into some of the potential design flaws people are pointing out. And the number one concern brings us right back to that representation gap we talked about earlier. Here's the kicker. The plan is for more than 70%, 70% of the ANARF's funding to come from private, non-government sources. But the board that's making all the big strategic decisions, it has almost no one from the actual domestic Indian industry that's supposed to be providing all that cash and driving the innovation. See the disconnect? And to really hammer this point home, check this out. The promise is all about fostering industry collaboration. But the reality, the problem critics are highlighting, is that the one and only person on the board from the business world is an incredibly successful businessman who is based in Silicon Valley. There's no one representing the day-to-day realities of Indian industry or the scrappy entrepreneurs on the ground. And the list of potential hurdles doesn't stop there. People have pointed out the gender diversity issue, just one woman on the entire board and council. And then there are those classic nagging questions. Is this new body really going to be fast and nimble, or will it just become another layer of bureaucracy? Because when it comes to innovation, you can't afford long delays. Speed is everything. So, where does that leave us? Let's talk about the road ahead. What's next for this massive innovation machine? Look, even with all the debates about how it's designed, the ultimate goal is incredibly bold and crystal clear. This whole thing is built to create a powerful partnership between the public and private sectors. It's about shifting from government-led research to industry-driven innovation, all with the goal of turning India into a global R&D leader. So, it all comes down to this, doesn't it? The machine has been built, it's got a powerful trillion-rupee engine, it has a high-level brain, even if its design is being hotly debated. The big question is, will it all work together? Will India's trillion-rupee R&D machine actually achieve liftoff?